The boardroom was colder than I remembered, the glass walls trapping every stare, every shallow breath. Damon Carrick, the CEO of Vayner Systems, leaned forward across the polished table, his voice sharp enough to cut through bone. "Sign it," he ordered, tapping the falsified report that claimed the $1.2 billion server collapse was an external breach. My hand rested on the folder of real logs. "I won't," I said, my voice steady, though the air was thick with tension. This wasn't sabotage. It was negligence, and lying won't erase that. The silence that followed was suffocating. Executives shifted in their seats, eyes darting toward Damon, afraid to be caught watching me. He let the pause drag, savoring the moment, before smiling as if the outcome had been scripted all along. "Then you're finished here, Narissa, effective immediately." His words struck harder than any blow. The HR director, already waiting near the door, stepped forward and slid an envelope onto the table. My termination letter. The timestamp gleamed at the top, prepared before I had even entered the room. This wasn't a reaction, it was an ambush. Now. Don't let stress do the same to your body. Roll your shoulders slowly 3 times, then sit up straight in your chair. This simple thing is more beneficial than you think. Now. Tell me, where are you watching from? If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, please like and subscribe. Your voice matters here, even if others try to silence you. Laughter rippled at the far end of the table, forced and uneasy. Damon's gaze swept the room like a command, daring anyone to dissent. Then he added the final insult. "This collapse happened because of a compliance failure. Our lead architect should have caught it, should have prevented it, should have cared more." The accusation hit like a public flogging. I felt 9 pairs of eyes slice into me, some shocked, others eager to look away. Years of sacrifices reduced to a single sentence. My entire career condensed into failure. That was when I saw him, Ellis, Damon's young assistant, seated near the corner. His head dropped quickly, avoiding my eyes, but not quickly enough to hide the tremor in his hands. Guilt, fear, maybe even a buried truth he dared not speak. I gathered the folder of authentic reports, my lifeline of facts that no one wanted to touch, and stood. My legs felt made of stone, each second stretched into an eternity, the humiliation sinking deep into my skin. I didn't shout, I didn't plead, I simply turned, carrying the weight of a verdict that had already been written before I walked in. The elevator doors opened with a mechanical sigh, and I stepped into the glass atrium that had once felt like a monument to progress. Today, it was nothing but a stage for humiliation. Rows of desks and open workstations lined the lobby, employees frozen mid-gesture as I walked past. Some lowered their heads, pretending to be absorbed in screens that had gone dim. Others watched me with wide eyes before quickly looking away, as if the act of acknowledging me might endanger their own survival. My heels struck the marble floor with sharp precision, each click ricocheting against the silence. I felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against my back. No one spoke, no one dared. In a company where silence was loyalty and loyalty meant survival, to offer me so much as a nod would have been career suicide. Then came the sound I will never forget. A single, high-pitched beep. I swiped my ID badge across the turnstile one final time, and the system rejected me. The red light blinked like a wound. The electronic denial louder than a shouted insult. Beep. Access denied. In that moment, it was more than a card being deactivated. It was a verdict. It was the sound of my identity being erased from the very building I had spent half my life inside. I stood there for a fraction longer than I should have, my hand frozen against the scanner. The humiliation settled into my bones, heavy and immovable. 17 years of work, of sacrifice, of choosing server alarms over birthdays and quarterly deadlines over family dinners, all reduced to a tone less than a second long. A single note that declared, "You are nothing here." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but habit won. The message glowed across the screen. Don't forget, tonight is Mom's 60th. We saved your seat. My sister had sent it with a string of confetti emojis, innocent and cheerful, unaware that I was standing in the lobby, stripped of everything I thought defined me. The irony burned. I had chosen to stay late last week, patching gaps in Damon's reckless system instead of helping plan the party. I told myself there would always be more time, another milestone, another year. But birthdays don't wait. Neither does life. And here I was, discarded by the company I had given everything to, realizing too late that I had stolen irreplaceable years from my own family. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, the words searing into me more deeply than Damon's dismissal. Losing my job was brutal, but it wasn't the loss that hollowed me out. It was the realization that I had traded away moments that could never be recovered. And for what? For a corporation that treated me as expendable? I walked again, this time slower, the humiliation joined by something colder: grief. The stairs followed me all the way to the revolving doors. The building's glass reflected my image back at me, shoulders rigid, chin held too high to reveal the fracture inside. Suppression became my armor. If I cracked now, if I let the tears slip, they would win twice. So I kept moving. The doors turned, releasing me into a world that carried on without pause. Outside, the city hummed with indifference. Traffic lights blinked. Pedestrians hurried past. And no one cared that I had just lost everything. Isolation clung to me like a shadow, sharper than the beep of the turnstile, sharper than the silence of colleagues too afraid to speak. But beneath that silence, a question formed. If my sacrifices had been meaningless to them, perhaps it was time I found out what they truly meant to me. The building's lobby was a cavern of glass and chrome, designed to impress visiting clients with its scale. I had passed through it thousands of times without noticing the details. The waterfall wall, the overpriced floral arrangements, the television screens mounted above the reception desk playing financial news on a loop. Today, every detail screamed at me. I sat in one of the leather chairs near the center, my termination letter still folded in my hand like a bad joke. The television above the receptionist's counter flashed the Vayner Systems logo, the broadcast suddenly switching to a live press statement. Damon Carrick's face filled the screen. "Vayner Systems remains secure," he said smoothly, voice calm, as if nothing had happened. The recent server incident was the result of an external breach. Our security measures contained it quickly. Clients should have full confidence that there will be no lasting damage. External breach. I nearly laughed at the audacity. His words dripped with assurance, twisting failure into victory. Then he leaned closer to the microphone, lowering his tone. "Our compliance officer failed to detect irregularities in time. But let me be clear, this is not the fault of our infrastructure. This was a coordinated attack against us. Compliance officer." He didn't have to say my name. Everyone in the industry knew who he meant. Damon had framed the target neatly. Blame Narissa Tate, discard her, and carry on with the show. Around me, people waiting for rides or meetings glanced up at the TV. A man in a gray suit muttered, "So they had someone asleep at the wheel." His companion shook her head, whispering, "Always the compliance folks. One mistake and billions vanish." Neither realized the woman they were condemning was sitting 10 feet away, her pulse hammering against her ribs. I gripped the armrest of the chair, forcing myself not to react, not to give them the spectacle Damon wanted. But the humiliation was suffocating, pressing harder than the glass walls above me. Then came the betrayal that cut deeper than Damon's lie. Among the reporters stood Michael Lane, a journalist I had once trusted. Years ago, he'd interviewed me for a profile on ethical cybersecurity. He'd called me the conscience of the field. He knew my record. He knew my principles. "Mr. Carrick?" Michael asked, voice steady. "To confirm, This was a foreign attack? Not an internal systems failure? The words hit like a knife. No skepticism, no demand for proof, just a polished repetition of Damon's narrative. Damon's grateful nod sealed it. The lie was now gospel, sanctified by the very journalist who once championed me. My stomach churned. To hear Damon twist reality was rage enough. To hear Michael sell out so easily was worse. Disgust spread through me, bitter and corrosive. The TV Chiron flashed. Viner Systems contains breach. Compliance officer failure cited. My name wasn't there, but the implication was clear to anyone who knew the company. I lowered my eyes, suppressing the urge to scream across the lobby. Suppression was my last armor, because tears here, in the very building that had just erased me, would only feed their victory. And yet, beneath the humiliation, a colder truth stirred. If Damon and his allies were willing to sacrifice me so effortlessly, perhaps it was time I stopped protecting the empire I had helped build. The lobby's noise faded into static as my phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped it out with trembling fingers, half expecting another headline. Another blow to the name Damon had just dragged through the mud. But what lit up the screen wasn't a news alert. It was a message only I could see. Silent reversal protocol engaged. Countdown. 12 minutes. I froze. My breath lodged in my throat. The words pulsed faintly against the dark screen. Clinical and merciless. For a second, I thought I had brushed the wrong icon, somehow triggered it by accident. But then I remembered. There was no manual trigger. Years ago, when I first embedded the protocol into Vayner's architecture, I designed it to activate under one condition only: termination. The instant Damon's HR director had logged my dismissal into the system. The clock had started. Not because I pressed a button. Not because I sought revenge. Because the company itself had tripped the wire. My hands steadied as the realization settled over me. They had written their own death sentence with that smug envelope in the boardroom. Still, my chest tightened with unease. 12 minutes wasn't just a number, it was a fuse. And at the end of that fuse waited $6.4 billion in locked transactions. Frozen contracts, revoked licenses. A corporation wouldn't die quietly. It would convulse, taking innocent employees, families, and clients along for the collapse. My thumb hovered over the screen. Do I let it run? The question pressed into me, heavier than Damon's insults, sharper than the humiliation of the turnstile's denial. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about me. I pictured Ellis, the assistant who couldn't meet my eyes in the boardroom. Young, afraid, barely starting his career. He wasn't responsible for Damon's arrogance or the board's greed. Then I thought of the junior engineers who had sent me texts of gratitude earlier. Kids who had been pressured into signing documents they barely understood. Would they be collateral damage now? The countdown ticked lower. 11 minutes. 3 seconds. 11 minutes. 2 seconds. Each second was a hammer against my ribs. I leaned back in the leather chair, forcing myself to breathe slowly. Panic wouldn't help. Neither would guilt. I had created the protocol for one reason: to protect myself from exactly this. Damon believed I was expendable, a convenient scapegoat. But the system knew otherwise. The system recognized the original architect. Cold clarity slid through me, washing away the tremors. I wasn't the one who fired the shot. Damon had. The moment he cut me loose. The mechanism engaged. My choice wasn't whether to punish him. My choice was whether to undo the safeguard I had once promised myself I'd never erase. I tightened my grip on the phone. If I stopped it now, the empire would continue unchallenged. They would paint me as incompetent. The world would believe them. And the same cycle of deception would grind on, swallowing others just like me. But if I let it run, then truth would finally have teeth. The lobby TV flashed with Damon's smug face again, reporters still hanging on his every word. He smiled as if the world were already buying his narrative, as if erasing me had been effortless. My disgust hardened into something cleaner, sharper, resolve. The countdown blinked. 10 minutes and 45 seconds. I slid the phone back into my pocket, spine straightening as though a weight had been lifted. Let them laugh. Let them believe the lie for 11 more minutes. When the fuse burned out, they would realize the cost of underestimating me. Let me ask you this. If you were in my place, would you let the clock keep ticking? Or would you pull the plug before it all burned down? And what do you think Damon will try when he realizes what's coming? Stay with me until the end. You won't want to miss how this explodes. My phone buzzed again, a low tremor against my palm as I sat motionless in the lobby chair. I half expected another headline. Another knife slid between my ribs, but when I glanced at the screen, what I saw instead stopped me cold. Thank you. 2 words, nothing more. From a junior engineer whose number I barely recognized. A second message followed from another. You did the right thing. And then another. And another. Until my phone lit up like a constellation. They weren't long texts, some just emojis, some simple affirmations. But the meaning was unmistakable. They had all been in that same room of pressure before. They knew what it was like to have a signature demanded at the edge of a threat. And they had seen me say no. For the first time since Damon's performance on the podium, I felt something ease inside me. Vindication, not loud, not triumphant, but quiet. Like a current moving under the surface. The Empire wanted silence, yet whispers found their way through. Then came Ellis. His name appeared at the top of my notifications, my chest tightening. The assistant who couldn't meet my eyes in the boardroom. The boy with shaking hands. His message was just a link. No explanation, no greeting, just a single line. You'll know what to do. My thumb hovered before pressing play. The video was grainy, taken on a phone hidden under a folder. Damon's voice filled the small screen. Mark it as external. No one needs to know it was us. Draft the statement. Have it ready. If Tate won't sign, we'll cut her loose. There's always another compliance officer. The camera caught his smirk, his arrogance, his complete certainty that no one would ever dare to expose him. I sat straighter, my pulse quickening. Proof. Not rumors. Not suspicions. Proof of fraud straight from his mouth. But then the reality hit. Ellis had recorded this. Ellis had sent it to me. He had risked his job, maybe even his career, by capturing Damon in that moment. If I released the video, Damon would fall, but so might Ellis, and perhaps half the people visible in the reflection of that glass table. They hadn't spoken up. They had bowed their heads. But I knew the truth. Silence in that room hadn't always meant complicity. Sometimes silence was survival. My thumb hovered over the forward button. I could imagine the fallout, the headlines, the scrutiny, the investigations. Reporters would dig into every name, every face, asking why no one stood up. Careers would be destroyed, not just Damon's. Was I willing to scorch everyone to expose him? The messages kept coming. You saved us today. We couldn't say no, but you did. Please don't give up. Each one whispered into the void of my isolation, building something stronger than rage. Quiet vindication. That's what it felt like. Not a victory shouted in headlines or splashed across news feeds, but a recognition, carried on the unseen network of people who still valued the truth. I locked the phone screen, holding it tightly in my hand, as if it were both weapon and shield. Damon had the stage, the cameras, the journalists parroting his lies. But I had something more fragile, more dangerous. Proof, and the trust of those too afraid to use it themselves. Ellis had gambled everything to put this in my hands. That alone told me he believed I could carry it where he couldn't. And so I sat there in the glass lobby, heart steadying, the weight of choice pressing on me. The video wasn't a blade to swing recklessly. It was leverage. It was timing. And when the right moment came, Damon wouldn't just stumble. He'd collapse under the truth spoken in his own voice. The air outside the headquarters buzzed with unease. A massive LED screen stretched across the building's facade, the kind usually reserved for investor highlights or product launches. Now, it carried Damon Carrick's face in high definition, every pore smoothed by lighting, every lie polished by a communications team. Vayner Systems has the situation fully under control, he declared, his voice calm, soothing, dripping with the kind of authority that only exists when built on fear. His tone was measured, almost paternal, as if he were the one steadying an anxious public. There is no reason for panic. Our systems are resilient. We remain confident. Confident. The word tasted bitter. I stood among a crowd of pedestrians who had stopped to watch, some shading their eyes against the noon glare. Strangers murmured, reassured by his composure, unable to sense the rot under the polish. I knew better. My phone was still buzzing in my pocket, the silent reversal countdown ticking quietly toward devastation. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to appear like any other passerby. The marble walls behind me reflected my silhouette, tall and still, as if frozen between two worlds, the one I had been thrown out of and the one I was about to change forever. The screen flickered, shifting from Damon's face to a rolling ticker at the bottom. At first, the number seemed like any other financial feed. Then I saw it. 3.2B in transactions stalled. The crowd reacted with soft gasps, murmurs of confusion. A man beside me frowned at his phone, refreshing a trading app. Wait, what does that mean? He muttered to no one in particular. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse quicken. The protocol was working exactly as I had built it, each layer collapsing inward, locking the arteries of their empire. Damon continued speaking, oblivious or perhaps pretending not to notice the line of text undermining him. We have identified the source and resolved the issue. Our global partners can rest assured their assets are secure. His words and the ticker clashed like two discordant notes in the same song. I caught myself gripping the strap of my bag too tightly, my knuckles white. Tension hummed through my body, sharp and electric. Each second felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to tilt. A voice cut through the murmur. Narissa? I turned. A familiar face moved toward me. Caleb, a former colleague from my early years at Vayner. His expression was strained, caught between concern and fear. He stopped just short of the crowd, leaning close enough for me to hear, but not enough for others to notice. They'll come after you, he whispered. If they figure this out, you'll be the first name on their list. Get out while you can. The words sank like a stone. My instincts screamed to run, to disappear before Damon's fury found me. Yet another part of me, colder and sharper, held me rooted in place. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a reckoning. I gave Caleb the faintest nod, my face unreadable. He hesitated, then melted back into the crowd, leaving only the echo of his warning behind. On the screen, Damon's smile never wavered, but the ticker kept scrolling. Relentless, undeniable. Billions stalled, global partners affected. The cracks in his facade were widening, and I alone knew just how deep they ran. I shifted my gaze back to the countdown glowing inside my pocket. The tension pressed harder, each second stretching into eternity. Anticipation coiled tight in my chest. Not fear, not triumph, just the certainty that what came next would change everything. Inside the building I had just been expelled from, chaos was spreading like fire through dry brush. I couldn't see the control room anymore, but I didn't need to. I knew what those monitors upstairs were showing, red alerts cascading one after another across the world map. Tokyo, offline. Frankfurt, frozen. Dubai, locked. The arteries of the system I had built were seizing shut, each closure tripping the next like a chain reaction I had designed years ago. A silent safeguard waiting for the day they decided I was expendable. My phone vibrated again and again, a drumbeat marking the unraveling. System alert. Transaction stalls. Global sync error. License validation failure. Each notification was both familiar and foreign. Lines of code I had written, now flexing their teeth. It was like watching dominoes topple in slow motion. The inevitability heavy in every buzz of my phone. Nothing could stop the next piece from falling. On the street around me, the first ripples of awareness were spreading. Brokers and traders hunched over their phones, voices rising into clipped shouts. A man in a gray suit barked into his headset, his words jagged with panic. Across the plaza, the massive screen on the building's facade split into two feeds. Damon still speaking, his voice smooth but strained, while beside him scrolled a live ticker in flashing red. Global transfers delayed. 1.9B, 2.4B, 3.2B. Numbers climbing like a fever, each update hitting harder than the last. The panic wasn't contained inside the headquarters anymore. It was seeping outward, into markets, into homes, into every place that depended on Vayner's reach. Another alert buzzed across my screen. Vayner Systems stock plunges 12% in minutes. Seconds later, another. Competitor shares surge amid instability. I tapped the link and watched the numbers spike in real time. Rivals I had once warned Damon about were now soaring as investors leapt toward safer ground. The decision had already been made. The market wasn't waiting for explanations. Vaynor was sinking. A tightness gripped my chest, panic swelling with every headline. My system was doing exactly what I had programmed it to do, but the scale of its impact was staggering. Years of work were unraveling in minutes, billions evaporating across continents. I pictured employees watching their monitors go black, clients demanding answers, families who depended on paychecks that might now be in jeopardy. That weight pressed on me like a hand against my lungs. My phone rang, a sharp tone, cutting through the noise of the street. Unknown number. International code. For a long moment, I stared at it, before finally answering. Ms. Tate? The voice was clipped, accented, European, deliberate. We represent an investment group with interests in your sector. We are aware of your situation. A pause. Heavy, calculated. We'd like to extend you an offer. Leadership, resources, full authority. All we ask is that you unlock the system before it collapses completely. My mouth went dry. They weren't even hiding it anymore. Investors had already realized Damon couldn't fix this. They had traced the failure back to me. And instead of condemning me, they were reaching out, offering me power for a fleeting second. Temptation surged hot in my blood. Leadership, validation, the chance to rebuild everything Damon had stolen, to finally shape the future of my creation without compromise. But beneath that lure was the rot of betrayal. Unlocking the system now would save Vayner, polish Damon's lies, and bury the truth all over again. The very thing I had sworn I would never allow. I steadied my breath, closed my eyes. I appreciate your confidence, I said at last, voice cool and deliberate. But the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. A long silence hummed on the line before the caller exhaled, weary. Then I suspect the collapse will be historic. The call ended abruptly, leaving only the weight of their words hanging in my ear. Sliding the phone back into my pocket, I exhaled slowly. Around me, the panic thickened, voices sharp, screens glowing red, footsteps quickening. It tried to pull at my conscience, tugging on guilt and fear. But I forced myself to stand still. I hadn't come this far to blink now. Above me, the ticker screamed its latest headline. Vayner stock halted. Rival shares up 27%. Damon's empire was unraveling thread by thread. And for once, I wasn't the one being crushed beneath it. The giant screen above the headquarters no longer carried the sleek polish of corporate control. What filled it now was raw, unscripted collapse. Damon Carrick's face loomed 20 feet tall, but the composure he wore like a tailored suit had slipped away. His jaw was clenched so tightly it looked painful, his eyes darting toward aides who hovered at his side. Whispering frantically, he snapped at them, his lips curling in irritation, but the camera captured every flicker of desperation. "This is under control," he barked, yet the crack in his voice betrayed him, even from the edge of the crowd. I could hear the strain. The lie rang hollow. Seconds later, the mask shattered completely. He slammed his fist against the podium, the microphone catching the full violence of his frustration. The sound reverberated across the plaza, amplified into something that felt less like leadership and more like collapse. "Get her signature!" Damon roared. The words ricocheted off glass towers and concrete walls, cutting through the stunned silence of the thousands gathered below. For a suspended heartbeat, the entire world seemed to freeze. No one spoke. Everyone understood what those words meant. He hadn't just admitted failure. He had confessed, in front of journalists, cameras, and a watching market, that my name still held the key. I tilted my head back slightly, watching his panic unfold in high definition above me. My own reflection flickered faintly in the screen's glare, merging with his unraveling face. A strange mix of emotions churned through me: disbelief that he had broken so quickly, vindication that my years of warnings were finally undeniable, and something darker that I barely wanted to name. For years, Damon had told me I was replaceable. "Compliance is just paperwork," he used to sneer. "Anyone can do it." He had diminished my work to margins and signatures, stripping it of the architecture I'd built into the system's foundation. But now, before the eyes of the financial world, he had admitted the opposite. I wasn't replaceable. I was indispensable. The reporters knew it too. Their voices grew sharper, slicing through the noise. "Whose signature? Mr. Carrick? Are you saying your former lead architect still has control?" The words circled him like vultures. His aides scrambled to cut the feed, but they were far too late. Screenshots were already spreading, clips looping endlessly across social media. 3 words replayed over and over: "Get her signature." The bitter satisfaction burned slow and steady inside me. Damon had built an empire on the illusion of control. In 12 minutes, that illusion had been ripped away, exposing the truth: that without me, he was nothing. My phone vibrated against my palm. The number flashed, familiar and unwelcome, against my better judgment. I answered. "Narissa." Damon's voice rasped through the line, hoarse and frayed. He sounded smaller without the stage, without the cameras. "Listen to me. We don't have to fight each other." A laugh threatened to rise, sharp and disbelieving. Only hours earlier, he had thrown me to the wolves without hesitation. Now, with the walls collapsing, he spoke as though we were lifelong partners. "You'll be reinstated immediately," he rushed on, words tumbling over each other. "Triple your salary, full authority over your department, a guaranteed seat at the table. All you need to do is stop this, end the protocol." I let the silence stretch, long enough for him to feel it press against his panic. My gaze stayed fixed on his image above me. The trembling hands, the sheen of sweat under studio lights, the composure bleeding away in real time. Everyone could see it. The entire plaza bore witness to the collapse of Damon Carrick. False hope. That was all he was offering. He thought money and status could patch the wound he had carved, could buy back the trust he had shredded, the humanity he had mocked when he fired me in front of 1,000 employees. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, a counterpoint to his unraveling. "Damon, this system is doing exactly what it was meant to. You fired me. The protocol responds to that. Nothing you offer can change the fact that you pulled the trigger." A sharp intake of breath hissed through the line. He tried again, his words stumbling. "Narissa, think of the people, the employees, the markets." I ended the call before he could finish. My hands were steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. A bitter satisfaction wrapped around me like armor. For once, Damon was the one scrambling for mercy, and I was the one who could not be bought. Above me, his image flickered again, reporters shouting, the ticker rolling blood red across the screen. His empire, once sold as unshakable, was bleeding in public view, and all it had taken was his own voice betraying him. 3 minutes. That was all the time left on the countdown, glowing against the inside of my pocket. Each second pulsed like a drumbeat, matching the frantic rhythm of my heart. I pressed my palm over the phone as if I could muffle the truth, but nothing silenced the numbers marching steadily toward collapse. 3 minutes until Vayner's empire froze completely. My father's voice rose in my mind, sharp and unwavering, as though he stood beside me even now. Never let liars write the ledger. He had said it when I was a child, standing over the kitchen table where he balanced bills with ink-stained fingers. I hadn't understood then, but now, those words burned through me, a commandment etched into my bones, and yet fear threaded through every nerve. Not fear for myself. I had already been stripped of everything they could take. It was fear for the people whose names I didn't know, whose livelihoods dangled on the other side of that countdown. Engineers who had mortgages, analysts who had children in school, the receptionist in the lobby who smiled at everyone. Even me. They weren't Damon. They weren't the board. But when the timer hit 0, they would feel the aftershocks all the same. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A new message blinked across the screen from my sister. Mom keeps asking why you're not here tonight. She's looking at the door like you'll walk in any second. The words sliced deeper than Damon's dismissal, deeper than the lies on national television. Tonight was her 60th birthday. I had promised I'd be there. Instead, I had chosen another late night at Vaynor, another crisis to solve, another sacrifice for a company that had discarded me like waste. And now my mother was sitting at her own celebration, still waiting for me, guilt wrapped around my chest, squeezing tighter with every blink of the countdown. 2 minutes now. My throat ached as I fought for breath. Temptation slithered in. What if I canceled it? What if I stopped the protocol before the final lock engaged? I could still save the company. I could still protect the innocent employees who had nothing to do with Damon's fraud. Maybe if I reached out, I could negotiate something, a reinstatement, a restoration. Maybe even forgiveness for abandoning my family yet again. I imagined their faces, engineers hunched over screens, desperate to keep systems alive, parents silently panicking about what they would tell their kids if paychecks vanished. They didn't deserve to be caught in Damon's firestorm. But then the other vision rose. Damon, standing smug at the podium, spinning lies while journalists nodded along. The board, congratulating themselves for containing a disaster they had caused. Michael Lane, the reporter who had betrayed me, packaging the deception for public consumption. If I stopped it now, the lie would win. And once again, truth would be the casualty. 1 minute left. The crowd outside the building buzzed with nervous energy, faces tilted toward the massive screen. The ticker screamed red. Numbers climbing into billions stalled. My pulse hammered so loudly I thought they might hear it. I closed my eyes, whispering under my breath, "I can't let liars write the ledger." My father's words steadied me, though fear still churned. The temptation to undo it clung stubbornly, whispering of mercy, of reprieve, of escape. But mercy for Damon was cruelty to the truth. 30 seconds. I tightened my grip on the phone, the screen burning against my palm. The choice was no longer about me, or even the company. It was about whether justice was worth the cost of collateral pain. 10 seconds. My body trembled, caught between dread and resolve. Fear roared. Temptation pulled. And still, I did not move. At exactly 9:36 a.m., the countdown ended. My phone pulsed once, then went still. The silent reversal protocol had completed. On the massive screen above the Vayner headquarters, numbers flickered, then fractured into chaos. Damon's desperate face was swallowed by cascading red alerts. Within seconds, the ticker screamed a single line that would brand itself into history: 6.4 B assets revoked. The sound of panic spread like a wave. Gasps rose from the crowd clustered outside the glass atrium. Strangers clutched their phones, refreshing apps that no longer responded. Traders barked into headsets, their words tangled in static. News anchors on the split screen spoke faster, their voices climbing in pitch. By the time the words reached me, they had already acquired a chilling title: The 12-Minute Implosion. I stood motionless, watching with an eerie calm. The panic wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Damon, to the board, to every hand that had signed its name on fraudulent lines. My role was finished. The system was carrying out the justice I had embedded in its bones years ago. A safeguard Damon had dismissed as paranoia. Reports flowed in real time. In Frankfurt, brokers watched screens freeze mid-transaction, eyes widening as billions hung suspended. In Tokyo, banking partners demanded explanations no one could give. In Dubai, investors who had bet their futures on Vayner were left staring at numbers that refused to move. The arteries of an empire were locked in place, and nothing Damon said could loosen them. And yet, inside me, there was no chaos, no tremor, no breaking flood, only a strange, cold triumph. Then my phone buzzed once more. This time with a quiet notification meant only for me. Assets transferred to neutral escrow, awaiting arbitration. Relief swept through me like a muted wave. The money wasn't gone. It hadn't been erased into nothingness. It was held, suspended beyond Damon's reach, beyond the board's manipulation, frozen until independent investigators determined the truth. Justice, not revenge, balance, not destruction. But even in triumph, the weight of it pressed against my chest. $6.4 billion wasn't just a number. It was payrolls, pensions, partnerships. Thousands of lives would feel the ripple. Some would curse my name without knowing it. Others would lose sleep wondering if their futures had dissolved. I whispered into the empty air, steady but quiet. This isn't vengeance, it's correction. Because that was the truth. If I had wanted revenge, I could have buried the assets entirely, made them vanish into the void. Impossible to trace. But I hadn't. I had chosen escrow, chosen accountability over annihilation. The company would not die because I wished it. It would stand trial because it had lied. On the screen, Damon's voice broke through again, faint but frantic, almost drowned by the chaos around him. He shouted at aides, flailed against the barrage of questions. His composure unraveled in front of millions. "This is sabotage," he cried, his face slick with sweat. "This is an attack." But the world had already seen the real truth. His earlier words, "Get her signature," had gone viral within minutes. His desperation had become his confession. Nothing he said now could unring that bell. I remained still, almost detached, as though standing on a mountain watching a storm lash the coast below. The devastation was undeniable, but so was its inevitability. Damon had built an empire on arrogance, convinced himself he was untouchable, in 12 minutes. The illusion was gone, for the first time in years. My heart slowed instead of raced. The fear, the humiliation, the guilt, they all fell silent, leaving only clarity. I hadn't merely survived Damon's attempt to erase me. I had rewritten the terms of survival. Around me, the city roared with confusion. Screens went black. Headlines screamed. Investors scrambled. But inside, I felt the rare stillness of victory without celebration. A victory not of fire, but of frost. Not loud, but undeniable. And in that cold clarity, in that quiet triumph, I finally understood. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't march or shout or burn. Sometimes it arrives as a single line of code, a silent countdown, and 12 minutes that change everything. The silence after the implosion lasted barely an hour. Then, the next wave hit. It started with a notification from an encrypted account. I knew the sender before I opened it. Ellis, the young assistant who couldn't meet my eyes in the boardroom, who had sent me the proof of Damon's corruption. Now, he had gone further. The file attached was only 30 seconds long, but 30 seconds was all it needed. Damon's voice, unmistakable, barked from the shadows of the boardroom. Mark it as external. No one needs to know it was us. Draft the statement. Have it ready. If Tate won't sign, we'll cut her loose. There's always another compliance officer. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. On Twitter, spliced into GIFs. On YouTube, slowed down for dramatic effect. On news broadcasts, played in endless loops with bold captions. CEO orders cover-up. And then came the cherry on top. Live footage captured Damon mid-meltdown, still in front of the cameras, face pale, voice cracking under the pressure. We might have triggered this ourselves, he stammered. The moment hung in the air like a guillotine blade, and then it dropped. Clean and final. By noon, that single line had already become the internet's favorite toy. Memes multiplied like wildfire. Damon's face photoshopped onto crumbling statues. Captions reading, "Triggered myself." A parody account appeared within minutes, tweeting nonsense excuses under his name. "I didn't trip. The floor attacked me." Millions laughed while his empire burned. I watched from a quiet corner of the city, perched on a bench across from a row of newspaper stands. Every headline was about him. Every photo showed his downfall, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, I laughed. Not loud, not hysterical, but the kind of laugh that escapes when the weight finally cracks, when bitterness finds a sharp edge of humor. Catharsis. That's what it felt like. To see Damon undone, not just by the system, not just by me, but by his own arrogance captured on tape. His attempt to humiliate me had rebounded with such precision that it felt almost poetic. But beneath the humor was something else. The chants of strangers. Crowds outside the headquarters were no longer whispering. They were shouting, "Hero! Justice! Narissa Tate!" My phone lit up with requests. Journalists, networks, even activists begging for interviews. Everyone wanted me to speak, to claim the spotlight that had landed squarely at my feet. And yet, I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, not because I didn't care, but because stepping into that circus would make me exactly what Damon had always been, a performer, playing for applause. I hadn't endured humiliation, isolation, and betrayal to end up as another talking head on the evening news. Instead, I turned the phone face down on the bench and listened to the laughter of a group of college students nearby. They were watching Damon stumble on a cracked iPad, replaying it again and again, roaring louder each time. "We might have triggered this ourselves," one boy mimicked, clutching his chest in mock despair. The others doubled over. I smiled. Not because they knew my story, but because they didn't need to. Damon's words had undone him. The truth, once buried, had clawed its way out in the most public, humiliating way possible. And in that, there was freedom. The world didn't need me to narrate his collapse. They could see it for themselves. My silence was not weakness. It was choice. A refusal to let them twist me into their spectacle. A reminder that the most powerful statement sometimes was no statement at all. So I stayed on that bench until the headlines shifted from shock to parody. Until Damon's name was no longer just tied to fraud, but to a global punchline. He had wanted me invisible. Now, he was the one mocked, dissected, diminished. The bitter weight inside me loosened, replaced with a lighter sensation I hadn't felt in years. vindication laced with laughter, justice with irony, catharsis edged by dark humor. As the sun dipped lower, I stood, brushed off my coat, and walked away without looking back. Let the world laugh at him. Let them call me what they wanted. For the first time, the silence was mine, and it was enough. The city exhaled with me that night. From my balcony, I watched the skyline glitter, each tower steady against the dark. Hours earlier, those same windows had pulsed with panic, executives trapped in boardrooms scrambling for explanations. Now, the streets below were quiet. The only sound was the hum of traffic, far away, like a faint memory I no longer belonged to. I leaned back in my chair, a cup of tea warm against my hands. The steam curled into the night air, rising without effort, vanishing into something larger. For the first time in months, maybe years, my shoulders weren't tight, my breath wasn't shallow. Liberation had a texture. It was this, the space to sit, to be, without anyone demanding a signature, a sacrifice, a silence. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. I almost ignored it, but the subject line froze me in place. Encrypted appointment notification. I opened it slowly, scanning the words twice before they sank in. Narissa Tate, appointed independent arbiter, global systems recovery. For a moment, I laughed softly at the irony. Damon had fired me at 9:30 that morning. By nightfall, the very institutions he had deceived had named me the one to oversee the cleanup of his empire. I hadn't asked for the title. I hadn't sought the power, but it was here, delivered quietly, inevitably, as if the universe had been keeping its own ledger. Across the balcony, the television inside my apartment flickered, its sound muted, but its images clear through the glass door. Damon Carrick stood at a podium, shoulders hunched, sweat on his brow, his voice visibly cracking. He bowed, deeply, before a crowd of reporters. His apology scrolled in captions at the bottom. "We regret the mistakes that led to this collapse. We take full responsibility." The man who once told me I was replaceable now bent himself nearly in half, begging the public for forgiveness he would never truly receive. I sipped my tea, the warmth grounding me, a small smile tugging at my lips. The contrast was almost surreal. Damon's empire, his board, his polished machines of deception, all of it had been brought low. And me, I was just a woman sitting alone on a balcony. No microphone, no cameras, no performance. Yet the image was the truest symbol of all. One quiet figure in the dark, while an entire empire bowed in daylight. The temptation to feel pity flickered, but it passed quickly. This wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't even about Damon. It was about something larger, something I had nearly forgotten. Agency. Truth. The unshakable dignity of saying no when everyone else stays silent. I had carried the burden of their lies for too long. Now, the burden was theirs. I looked down at the city again, at the currents of light tracing every street. Somewhere in those windows, engineers were still awake, families were still anxious, but they weren't invisible anymore. They had a chance to rebuild with honesty this time, and perhaps that was the quietest, strongest justice of all. The tea cooled in my hand, but the calm stayed. I knew tomorrow would bring negotiations, interviews, headlines calling me both savior and saboteur. But tonight, I needed none of that. Tonight, I had silence, the city, and the knowledge that the truth had finally spoken louder than any lie. I set the cup down, folded my hands in my lap, and let the night breathe around me. For once, I wasn't racing a clock. I wasn't trapped in someone else's story. I was free, and maybe that's the message worth carrying forward. Justice doesn't always arrive with explosions or applause. Sometimes it comes in silence, in patience, in the refusal to bow. Sometimes it looks like one woman, sitting steady against the night, while the powerful crumble. What about you? Do you think Damon's collapse was enough? Or should Narissa have gone further? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments below. And if you've ever felt invisible at work, but longed for your voice to matter, tap like, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of quiet power and unexpected justice.